Hey guys, welcome to a special edition on Integrated with Angela Erickson and the Traditional Thomist channel. Here, everybody is familiar with Nicholas Cavazos, the Traditional Thomist. How are you doing tonight?
I'm good. I'm still kind of like in this giddy mode where I'm like, wow, this is the first live stream at least I've ever done on my show, even though you kind of did all the heavy lifting. And then also the
I
first
felt like
time,
you did all the heavy lifting. That's hilarious. Well,
no,
I
I was
appreciate it.
I was full just screenshotting mode all afternoon, so you did all the heavy work. But you're also the first woman here on the show. So I guess technically welcome to my show as well. Welcome to the
Yeah,
Traditional Thomas.
you've
So
been on my channel before, haven't you?
yeah, like once or twice, but I haven't had a guest on my show in probably a good year and a half. It's all been solo videos, and I've never done a live stream before. And so this is fun. This is fun.
Well, and we have done some live streaming on the Meaning of Catholic for the Ascent, but we haven't done that in a long time for many reasons.
Exactly.
Many
Exactly.
reasons. But yeah, it's fun to finally be on here again a little bit. I've kind of taken a summer hiatus with some big life changes and getting ready to have a baby and all of that. And so naturally I started to get back into things when life is getting really busy, like even more busy again with homeschooling and stuff. How's your summer been? You've been doing what
It's
have you
been
been doing?
it's been interesting. I actually was kind of thinking about it today in chapel. I was like, what is the stock of my summer? Because, I have about one more week left before I start hitting the textbooks again. And I thought, I think the biggest thing that I'm taking away from it is the importance of cultivating charity toward God, in the sense that that's the root of the spiritual life. That's the root of the whole meaning of human existence, is to have greater charity for God that spills over into greater charity for our neighbor. That's something that I think has kind of been my big takeaway for the summer months, but it's also something that I can take with me going forward. So, yeah, it should be interesting to see what comes of that.
Well, and it's really important because as we move into the next election season, here we are trying to combat so much evil, and charity is really the only thing that can combat that. And so we decided to talk tonight about why Kamala will destroy America. It's not really a question of if, but when, if she gets into power.
Exactly.
Um, and it's actually terrifying. And one reason we decided to do this, you and I, is I'm from the state of Minnesota, so I'm extremely familiar with Tim Walz. I've testified at our state legislature against abortion bills, like the I don't know if I testified against the Born Alive Infant Protection Act or for that, excuse me, but the PRO Act, which is the reproductive act that they put into law last year, all these types of things. It's just like horrible. Our legislature is completely run by Democrats here, and Tim Walz is a straight socialist. And so we kind of wanted to talk about this dynamic because I've never seen anything like this. I mean, I have never seen, it's so polarized right now between conservatives and liberals and really progressives, I would say. Progressive socialists, I think, is probably the most accurate term for where the Democratic Party has veered to. It's not even liberal anymore. And it's like it's scary. Like as a mom, it's scary to realize that this is the environment that I might be raising my kids in. Because if things continue to go as they are, I don't foresee us having a country. Like I just don't see it happening. I don't know. What are your first initial thoughts about the coup that happened this summer on the Democratic side?
Yeah, it's just honestly, it's on the one hand wild, but also on the other end not that surprising when you really sit down and think about it. Because famously, Democrats in political circles, we've always talked about Democrats coronate their candidates. We've seen this, of course, when it came to, for instance, even 2008 with Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton. The Hillary Clinton got more of the popular vote, but yet the delegates were really pushing for a young African American president, and so they drifted over to him. And so there was, kind of an internal squabble, but they came to an agreement. Okay, you'll be my Secretary of State, etc. Then, of course, famously, right, in 2016, Hillary Clinton, it's her turn, and they shaft Bernie Sanders, and he's of course infuriated about that, but then he kind of turns on his own supporters and jumps upon her bandwagon and goes with that. Then, of course, famously in 2020, you have this whole host of candidates. I think it was like 12 or 16. I forget how many Dem candidates there were. There was dozens though, but they chose the oldest guy there because he has a big name, the Biden. And so they choose him because he was also an individual who, if you guys remember, he ran many times up to that point. The last one that he ran was in 2008, actually with Barack Obama. And the reason that Obama picked him as his VP was because there are a lot of racists in the Democrat Party who do not like the idea of a young black man as their nominee. And so the old white boomer was kind of the guy that would calm them down and, assuage their fears, if you will. This time around, though, it's not surprising. We saw the early on stages of dementia, Alzheimer's, whatever thing he is going through. No one exactly knows, but it's clearly he's going downhill.
I think he
And
has
so
Parkinson's. Yeah. I mean,
there's Parkinson's doctors at the White House. Yeah.
yeah.
Wow. But we've seen this onset kind of starting very early. And we saw this in 2020, but even if you go back and you watch clips from him and say like the presidential debates of 2020 and juxtapose it to the last debate that we had, it's night and day difference. And ever since, of course, that infamous debate, Dem Party leadership has been very much so interested, particularly Nancy Pelosi, in getting him removed from his role as the U.S. presidential nominee for the Democrat Party, as well as other big names. And they succeeded. I don't think he wanted to leave at all. I think that he was very sad about that. And I think that's the reason why he has been very silent this entire time after, a very mysterious resignation. He's been very, very quiet. And I think it's because he is depressed. He is sad. We, of course, famously got lots of reports that Jill Biden was screaming in the White House and she was flipping out. And of course, it makes sense. Like, they did not want to leave. They did not want to give power up. But the Dems coronate their candidate, and that's just how it is over there.
It's interesting because when I think about what's maybe going on, maybe these are some of the reasons why he's been so quiet, but I actually think it's just because he has been a puppet for so long. I mean, he has been notoriously dishonest as a senator. All of his years and decades of quote unquote service. He has been a notorious liar. He hasn't had a backbone on anything. He's always been able to be bought off. And now you have a man who is clearly senile. So they knew that he was easy to manipulate if you have the right money. He obviously has ties to Burisma and all these other world leaders that are able to persuade him to do certain things, you could say.
Yeah.
They have leverage against him. And so now they do kind of need to keep him quiet because he's senile. I mean, he's very evidently, it's not just, I don't think that he's upset about all of it. He was a puppet the whole time for the last 4 years. But now he's the puppet that needs to be quiet because they have a new person. They have a new marionette that they have to orchestrate through the next several months. And if he's not quiet, he could totally sabotage it. I mean, that debate with Donald Trump was absolutely devastating. And it was 100% on Biden's terms, all of it. And he absolutely humiliated himself and exposed the entire Democratic Party for what a bunch of frauds they are, because we were gaslit for the last 4 years when we were saying this guy is not well. This is elder abuse. And they actually thought that they could get him in front of a camera and that like nobody would notice that he is totally declined. So I think they have to kind of bury him a little, figuratively speaking. They have to keep him quiet for the next couple of months. Otherwise, Kamala has absolutely no chance. She has none. And the thing is, too, is that it kind of works to her benefit because the more she talks, the more of a moron she comes off. I mean, like, we all knew that she's so incredibly unlikable, but she doesn't do herself any favors anytime she opens her mouth.
No, in fact, that's, I think, why the moniker Hiding Harris is becoming a thing. She is very intentionally trying to pull this page from Joe Biden's 2020 playbook The problem with
exactly
this,
what she
though, is
did.
twofold. Number one, it they can't use the whole health and safety sickness arguments that they did in 2020. They can't use that.
I forgot
They're
about
trying to
that.
drum it up right now with monkeypox. I don't know if you've seen that, but over the last couple of days, they've been trying to
Oh yeah,
drum
it's
this.
back. It's back.
Yeah, and I'm like, well, I don't know if that was the one you're wanting to pick because I don't know how if people are aware of how monkeypox is spread, but
Spread. Yeah.
yeah. So that doesn't work. But yeah, she eventually has to do
It's
something because
Mpox now.
it's mpox.
Mpox.
Oh, okay. I get you. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's 27 or 28 days now that we've gone without an official interview from her. And she has given very few policy proposals aside from mainly platitudes. And then recently her economic policy, which we'll get into in this show. But it's very, very interesting. And this commenter right here, you're correct, Diane Elise. Oh, I'm pronouncing that right. Mainstream media is flipping the narrative. It's so powerful. It's very true. The clips that I'm going to show you guys today, I had to do some digging for. It's really sad. YouTube used to be a platform way back in the day where it was you are basically it's like your own little TV station and you put out what you want to put out, etc. But unfortunately, mainstream media, right? No one watches actual cable TV anymore, right? The average viewer, for instance, CNN is 68 years old, according to studies. So it's not something that my generation is going to go for. So of course, they publicize all of their articles and clips on YouTube. But when you're trying to just find objective journalism, it's very hard. A lot of the clips that I had to find, I had to dig deep after, going through, if you will, a wall of propaganda that it's just fawning over her. It's not objective. And so, like always, of course, Trump has to not just defeat one candidate, he has to defeat two, if you will, going into this thing.
Well, the mainstream media has been well, that was kind of one of the things that people loved about Donald Trump. And I'll be totally honest and transparent. During the 2016 election, I was not a fan of Donald Trump. I was a never Trumper. That's where I was at that time. Um, and in some ways, I think we all have like things that we don't love about him. I hope. We're not just staring through rose-colored glasses. Everything he does and says is just this like amazing whatever. Um, but of course, there is no doubt that our country was in much better shape when he was in office than it is now. I mean, we're going to talk about some of the data points here. But oh man, the economy, we're basically in World War III. Like this,
Exactly.
all of the things that they accused him of, like they would say, "This is what's going to happen." Donald Trump is just a dictator tyrant in office. I can't believe he has access to the nuclear weapons. And then we have Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, and it's like actually we might really be at risk of nuclear war.
We might. Yeah. And it's something that's terrifying to me because I'm 26. They've raised the drafting age to 26. It used to be 18 to 25. Now it's 18 to 26. It
Because they
scares the
can't
death
get anyone to go into the military. They
Exactly, but
can't.
it scares me because I'm like, some of these individuals, I mean, just in my short lifetime, it's like, okay, I've lived through Iraq, I've lived through Afghanistan, I've lived through clearly messing around in Syria, clearly they're messing around in Ukraine, clearly they would love a war with Iran. I don't want to be involved in any of these wars. I'm in my foreign policy. I'm very much so more of a strict isolationist. I'm kind of just like, all right, how about we take all of that money and fill in the potholes that are just everywhere on the streets, or get the veterans off the streets, or things like that, as opposed to making bullets and bombs that go and kill children or something. I mean, it's absolutely insane to me when you think about how our tax dollars are spent. I'm all for a big and strong military, 1000%. I think our military doesn't get enough credit at all. But I do think that what we have is incompetent leaders who, because of the interests of money, would rather go and start a war in some foreign country than promote their own citizens' well-being. It's like we're going to get into energy in a little while, but for the fact is that, as an example, Kamala Harris wants to ban fracking. She wants to ban offshore drilling. Okay, so let's just get rid of the entire U.S. main, if you will, industry when it comes to energy. Okay, well, where are we going to get all that from? Okay, well, you got your Green New Deal plan, but right here and now, I mean, how are people going to be driving? Oh, okay, we'll have to buy money, or excuse me, we'll have to buy gas from Venezuela or some other country. And it's like, okay, what? This is the problem. You care about other countries more than you actually care about your own people. and that's
Mm-hmm.
just the issue.
Well, and how many more people are struggling here in the US economically because we have outsourced all of that economy, all of those resources. We've outsourced them when we have plenty of it here. I mean, that was one of the reasons why gas was so low when Donald Trump was in office. He was like, we have these resources, we're going to use them and make America great again. We're going to avail ourselves of what we have instead of always outsourcing this and sending our money overseas. And the thing is, too, I think people need to remember that a lot of these people overseas are being exploited. Like it's a multifaceted issue. It's not that we're just sending money over there, but we're also further exploiting impoverished people, and then
Yeah,
we leave our own people impoverished. You know,
exactly.
it's horrible. It's horrible.
It
Um,
is.
so where do you want to start? Because
I
we
think
have
I think
lots of
I
videos and clips.
Yeah, I think even that's a good we should start off with that theme about caring for, if you will, non-citizens or just non-Americans more than they care about Americans. I think that's where we should start, and we can start with our clips on immigration. So for you guys who are watching this later or even live, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be going through maybe about 5 or 6 different policy areas that the Kamala Harris, Tim Walz team is going to get into. We're also, as we go through, I'm going to want to talk a little bit to Angela about her experience being in Minnesota and being under the governorship of Tim Walz, because she is a, if you will, a firsthand person of experience. And what we're going to be doing is really just showing you guys clips and statistics of what they have said, as well as comparing and contrasting what the Trump administration brought the United States versus what we're experiencing now. And I think this will be good. Angela is going to be able to give you guys the perspective really of Tim Walz. What I'm really wanting to show you guys is particularly the American dream is slipping away very quickly. And I can tell you guys from the bottom of my heart that Gen Z is suffering more ways than you guys know. Often people kind of meme about my generation, oh, they don't want to work, they don't want to do stuff, and there's definitely some lazy people out there. I'm not denying that. But there's a lot of young guys and girls who are working 2 jobs, 3 jobs just so they can go back to their apartment with their 5 roommates and survive. They don't even have we're contemplating as a generation. The concept of marriage not only seems far from us, we just see it as economically unrealistic, because we're saying, how can we afford this? How can we afford our own houses one day? How can we afford a 2-car garage one day? How can we afford children one day? It's going to be too expensive. And the reality is that this is what a lot of my generation is seeing. And this is why we've been nicknamed the nihilistic generation, because there's a lot of black pilling, doom scrolling that's going on. And
Yeah, part of
unfortunately,
it is you guys need to just get off social media.
part of it is that, but part of it also is
It is.
like as an example, like the average medium price of a house now is over 400 grand. And it's
Believe
like,
me, I know. I am about to have my 6th kid, and that's one thing too.
yeah,
Millennials are feeling it too. I think, um, you know, older generations, especially like the boomer generation, they took for granted a lot of the things that were afforded them
yeah,
by their hardworking parents. And yeah, like millennials are feeling a lot of that too. And I mean, keep in mind, when I graduated high school, we were at the height of I graduated in 2010. So we had the 2008 recession.
yeah,
Everything collapsed. And so I was graduating high school right after a huge recession. We were still trying to make our way out of it, and we're on the cusp of another recession, which they're happening more frequently. These big, massive recessions, we swing really hard in one direction or the other. And now I have like 6 mouths to feed, which is like a frightening
yeah,
prospect. Most millennials are in an enormous amount of debt, and are not saving for retirement, are not able to save for retirement. They won't get their Social Security. I think I was just listening to something recently that like they can promise a percentage of Social Security until like 2038 or something. And so
yeah,
like we've been paying this in our whole lives. I've had a job since I was 14, paying in Social Security my whole life. And I can't rely on that. It shouldn't have ever been set up that way to begin with, but that's a whole nother thing. It's a mess though. Like we're in a total mess.
I know. It is.
Yeah.
It is. So yeah, let's go ahead and talk about it. So what we're going to start first with, you guys, is we are going to be looking at the discussion around immigration. So, of course, Trump versus Harris's policies could not be any starkly different. I'll try to be as objective as at least as I can. Trump's policies at the moment when it comes to immigration are, number one, he wants to finish building the border wall. People criticize him obviously for the border wall concept in and of itself. Now all Republicans are signing on to that, which I think is somewhat humorous for some of his detractors. But people got to realize he got a lot of the wall built in his one term as president, but he didn't get it finished. Do you guys know why he didn't get it finished? He didn't get it finished because the House Republicans did not want to allocate him the finances. So all financial, power, if you will, inside of the U.S. government comes from the House. They have the purse strings, if you will, Congress does. And they did not want to give him that money. They said, okay, it costs around $5 billion. We can't do that. That's too expensive, right? That's not realistic. Okay, well, by comparison, it's about $5 billion to build a sports stadium, an NFL sports stadium in the United States. But it's too expensive, they say. Well, okay, initially we were giving $230 billion for the border of Ukraine in this war that's going on over there. So we're going to use that as kind of our primer to get into this discussion around immigration, because as you can see, both neocon Republicans, as well as we're going to look at it right here with Kamala Harris's views, they're essentially the same thing. It's continuing the same horrible train down the road, but you'll just see how radical her views are. So why don't we take a look at, I guess it's clip number 1. I have these kind of randomly numbered, but I guess clip number 1, and we'll test it out.
Okay.
Border. At some point, we are going to the border. We've been to the border. So this whole thing about the border, we've been to the border. We've been to the border.
You haven't been to the border.
And I haven't been to Europe. And I don't understand the point that you're making.
So yeah, that's our first one. So she is, in this context, she's getting hammered. I think it's by NBC about
Leslie Holt. Yep.
Yeah, Lester Holt. Yeah, about not going to the border because she was famously Joe Biden's border czar. They're trying to bury that now, right? Because the
inconvenient.
Conveniently, the White House openly works with these different propaganda networks to try to push forward their narrative. So they're trying to bury that. So he's criticizing her. He's saying, okay, what's going on here? You've not been to the border. There's a major border issue going on. We'll get more into the statistics as we go along. But yeah, what's going on here? And she says, no, I've been. And for the record, she's been to a border town where she went and had a photo op once or twice, but that was it. And at the point of this interview, I just think it's funny because she's insisting she's been, and then she just admits immediately afterward that she's not been to Europe, which is an insinuation she's not been to the border. So,
well, I mean, it's just, it's totally different though. Like you don't have to fly overseas. She's traveled all over the country. She was just in Minnesota earlier this year with Tim Walz at one of the biggest Planned Parenthoods in the country. We have one of the largest mega facilities in the entire country. And so they came to do a press conference and show their support for abortion, but she can't go down to the border where we have illegals crossing and trafficking human beings and drugs through at unprecedented rates.
Exactly.
What?
I don't think people understand like how dangerous the border is, not just because of all the illegal migrants that are coming across, but the amount of fentanyl that's pouring in, the amount of heroin and methamphetamine that's pouring in. I often say that if we want to solve the crisis at the border when it comes to, for instance, drugs, it's two things. It's not just building a wall and having better security down there, better manpower. We also have to be teaching virtue on this side of the border in our school systems and promoting that to families, as opposed to, promoting legitimate vice, which is what a lot of people do through the whole, hyper sex positive world, literally just promoting degeneracy or promoting Pride Month and things along that nature. Let's promote virtue so that there's not a customer basis on this side of the border that's able to say, oh, well, we want this, and so please send us your way. Because this stuff, whether it's methamphetamine, heroin, or whether it's, the fentanyl crisis going on right now. It is killing Americans at an exponential rate. And the fact that nothing is being done about it is mind-blowing.
Yeah, I mean, it's absolutely horrific, and people are dying every single day. I do want to take a quick moment just to go back and address this comment from a traditionalist Catholic. He points out that the government uses Social Security to make investments and hopefully get a return, and that's why they don't have all the money yet. Here's the problem though, is that they're investing at a super low rate. You get about a 4% return on their Social Security investments. A normal, good, healthy investment should bring in about 10 to 12%, sometimes even a little higher if you're investing well, in returns that money can then be properly dispersed amongst the people who've been paying in. A 4% rate is super low. It's not enough, especially with the rate that they're spending our money. So that's part of the problem. I understand that they're making those investments. They're making very poor investments, and that's why we've been saying for a long time, we don't know if this millennial generation will get their Social Security. We're like the first generation that since it was started, not that long ago, but that there's been some doubt about whether or not millennials will see Social Security when they retire. So anyway, just wanted to point that out. And too, the immigration issue does play a role in this because we're paying for these illegal immigrants. I mean, even here in Minnesota, we pay for four-year college for illegal immigrants. We pay for housing. We pay for food. We pay for everything. And they're busting them in. We have a huge population of Somalians and Mexicans and things like that have been coming in through the border. So anyway, it's a huge issue. It is very taxing on our economy. And these people they're not putting in money necessarily. They're not earning an income, a lot of them. They're not usually, I shouldn't say that, but there's been a lot of fraud here in Minnesota, especially with COVID, from these particular populations as well. So there's fraud, and then they're not adding any taxable income to Social Security. And so there's less than we're depleting our resources that way too.
Yeah, it's insane. And it's what I'm getting back to, which is just the preferential treatment of non-citizens over the citizens of this country. And what I really dislike is the fact that the left intentionally strawmans our argument by devolving the argument down to just race talking. They're like, well, you just don't like brown people, as if illegals equate brown people. Who made up that rule? Like, that's ridiculous.
Yeah,
it's nonsensical. Why don't you address the real issue, which is that, as you guys said in the 90s, Democrats said in the 90s, Bill Clinton famously said that if you are to send, hundreds of thousands, as we've had now, millions of illegals into a country, it is going to destroy the workforce because, as we all know, you can pay under the table, you can pay in the back room, if you will, and it's going to be way cheaper. It's going to, mess with wages when it comes to workers. And if you tax on top of that preferential treatment to illegal immigrants, then why do you even care about the sake of your own population? I think that this works well with, if we want to pull up clip number 2, this gives you an idea. So this clip is taken from the 2020 Democrat primary debates, I believe, if I remember the order of how I sent this. And it's talking about preferential treatment essentially to illegal immigrants when it comes to services that the government wants to give them.
Health care plans that you've proposed in one form or another. This is a show of hands question, and hold them up for a moment so people can see. Raise your hand if your government plan would provide coverage for undocumented immigrants. Okay.
You can't see, they're all raising their hands.
Yeah, every one of them. Mm-hmm. So the question, again, just in case people didn't hear everything she said, will your health care plan, your health care proposals, cover illegal immigrants, right? And every one of them said yes. And notice how the whole crowd claps. Now, I'm sure that most of the crowd there is donors, the donor class. And the reason that the donor class loves illegal immigration is because, as the old adage goes, Democrats want free votes, neocon Republicans want free slave labor, if you will, under the table. And so anyway, it messes with the American worker. Point being, though, is the fact that Kamala Harris, if she gets into power, is going to, with federal tax dollars, be trying to get pushed and get passed some type of universal benefit for illegal immigrants, which at that point, it's just like, okay, you can't get the VA fixed, right? We've always had VA problems in the United States. You clearly want to defund the police, which we'll get into that discussion in a while when it comes to ICE. But you want to give illegal immigrants this preferential treatment. Why? Is it to appear righteous and just because you don't actually have an ethics code that's rooted in like an eternal reality, or what is it?
Yeah, it's interesting. And we're going to talk a little bit about this as well. But yes, I mean, even Kamala Harris, with all the media flattery that she's been getting, there have been enough people that have been honest that are, because it's so outrageous. So yeah, maybe we want to move on to clip number 3 here. It's still a continuation of the immigration issue. Am I correct?
Yeah.
All right.
I believe so, yeah.
Okay, let's add it.
Of decriminalization of the border. If you'd be so kind, raise your hand if you think it should be a civil offense rather than a crime to cross the border without documentation. Can we keep the hands up so we can see them?
Let's remember, that's not just a theory.
Only one person didn't raise his hand.
There's still a few old blue dog Democrats out there that are being like, wait a minute, we all in the 1990s would have not raised our hand. Like, why are we doing that? I love that Joe Biden is doing that because, number one, deep down, like, again, he's just an old dude. And I'm like, yeah, you clearly do this positioning now because it's popular in your party. But yeah, in the 90s, I can pull up clips of you very clearly talking about like, yeah, deportations and things along that nature. And why would you deport someone for a civil offense as opposed to a federal offense?
Yeah, but do you remember, like, even in the 2020 debates between Kamala Harris and Joe Biden? I mean, she attacked him for being a racist. She attacked him for the school bus issue, busing kids like her, Black girls like her. You know what I mean? It was just, he's a total sycophant, and so is she. I mean, they capitulate on everything it's crazy.
Yeah, no, she hammers him for supporting, a policy that would not include forced busing, right? So for you young guys who don't know what that is out there, forced busing being in the civil rights era, let's, integrate the bus systems together. Biden was against that, and she's calling him out on that. She's saying, "Oh, you're a racist," and then of course she.
But I'll be your vice president.
I'll be your VP. And it's like, all right, well, I think I don't know if you really care. I don't know. Point being, though, is they want to say now that illegal immigrants, illegal aliens, that crossing our border is just a civil offense, and it shouldn't be considered a federal crime or something to that effect. Real just practical question for you. In the psyche of all of the, cartels out there who smuggle individuals across the border, sometimes multiple times because individuals are going over there and kidnapping people and bringing them back south, or vice versa, or just in general, right, exploiting people's dreams. Does this deter them, or does this only seem to soften the issue in their mind?
And this is a really interesting point too. I think it's really important that we talk about this issue of human trafficking. I think we sort of like to turn a blind eye, but America is one of the largest developed countries. We have some of the highest rates of human trafficking here. And Minnesota is actually one of the highest states for trafficking, which might surprise a lot of people. I think a lot of people look at Minnesota and we're like, oh, Minnesota nice, which isn't a thing. Anyone from Minnesota will know that it's Minnesota passive aggressive. It's kind of like the Southern bless your heart kind of thing.
I get you.
Yep. But the thing about Minnesota is that we actually have an open waterway through through Lake Superior, out through channels into the ocean. So that's one way that traffickers like to access Minnesotans, but also because we have I-35 going all the way north-south from Minnesota down to the border. And because we have a high Scandinavian population with the blonde hair, blue eyes, that's considered more exotic. And so you have women being trafficked out of Minnesota down south or out of the country through these waterways without being detected at very high rates. A lot higher than I think people realize. I remember when I was running a pregnancy center, I would have our staff do trainings to so that they could be aware of what red flags were for women who were being trafficked and were considering abortion. So it's really important that we talk about this because, yeah, Tim Walz, I've never heard anyone no policies, no major policies to try and prevent that type of trafficking here in Minnesota. We'll fight and scream and shout and do everything we can to make sure that abortion is legal through all 9 months of pregnancy up to the day of birth here. But we're not going to do anything to take care of these women who are being taken advantage of from down across the border, being trafficked all the way through these states. And human trafficking is an issue because obviously it's an affront to human dignity. But human beings are sold over and over and over again. So criminals, the cartel, all these people are making a profit over and over and over again on the abuse of these women. It's not like drugs where it's a one-time thing. And you're just like ruining people's lives. So yeah. Anyway, that's all. I'm like, I wish people understood that. And this is the governor that is a VP pick. Mm-hmm. And these issues are not being addressed.
They're not, and it leads to a good kind of theme that I really wish that we were seeing leadership in the Republican Party talk about. I see it a lot in Gen Z conservatives, so it's hopeful in the sense that it will come down the pike eventually. But it's that if we want to make America great again, it's not just that we should have good jobs or prioritize jobs for Americans here, or that we should have a secure border, or that we should honor the flag and, respect our police officers, but it's also that we should promote virtue again, that we should promote living well and not promoting degeneracy and vice. Because the problem is this: Republicans have oftentimes thought that small government equates limited government. There's actually a difference between the two. A small government can be powerful and should have a voice to be led. A limited government just merely chooses to limit itself in various spheres of influence in the country's society. And what I see is we have a major issue here in the United States where we've abandoned a principle of of some of the founding fathers, where they recognize that the only way for this country to thrive is if we have a virtuous people. And so we can't just have this live and let live attitude, because whether we like it or not, when we mess up, we affect people around us. You can know this by analogy. When a husband cheats on his wife, it affects everybody in the house, the wife, the kids if they have them, etc., and vice versa. We obviously know through clear reason that when someone is a murderer or a serial killer and goes out and takes a life, right, an innocent life, that affects the community around them. But we don't like to admit it, but it's true that things like pornography affect the psyche of people around us, and it destroys us. Now, I'm trying to talk about this in the context of my state, which is really taking a fight, if you will, to the porn industry. Thank goodness that this is not merely a religious versus secular thing. The reality is that pornography is a health epidemic, because it has the same long-term effects on the brain as methamphetamines, as heroin, etc., as well as it has disastrous consequences for not just the treatment of women and the promotion, especially on a lot of these websites, of child material, but on top of that, it destroys the psyche of men who view women as objects. And when you look at all of the cases of, serial killers, or you look at the vast majority of infidelity in the United States, somehow or another, it's going to be rooted back in pornography. And so we shouldn't be anti-sexuality. There's nothing wrong with that in its proper place and its proper order, but we should be anti-abusing our brains and allowing this health epidemic to continue.
Yeah, and I think abuse is the perfect word. I think sometimes people think abuse is overused, and it can be in some situations, but abuse really is to use something in a disordered way. And so that's exactly what you're describing. And I think people need to consider all of the implications of that, because you have people abusing one another and people abusing themselves through misuse. So really, really important that thing to talk about and consider. And I'm glad that Texas has been on the forefront of battling that. That would never happen here in Minnesota under Tim Walz. So
Yeah, thankfully there's been about, I think it's 11 states now that have either banned or are in the process of just finishing off the last touches of banning, for instance, Pornhub from their state's
They
internet,
should.
which is good. And how this links into this problem with immigration is that we, as you so eloquently put, we have a serious problem with human trafficking, but we wouldn't have it if we did not have an incentive in the country, an incentive of we've allowed and tolerated so much degeneracy that there's customers over here now who are looking for that type of thing. And, you know, therefore they're willing to buy it, or they're willing to, even if maybe, let's just say this, even if it's not their thing, their cup of tea, engaging in this type of heinous action. The fact is that we, whether it's through poor economy or just not teaching people, say, temperance when it comes to their financial goods, when we make money our idol, they're willing to sell drugs or sell humans for money, sell one of their own fellow human beings for money. We won't talk about that. We'll talk about how, oh, okay, you know, several hundred years ago, we had a serious issue with slavery. We should not deny that. But we'll focus everything on that and make it a wedge issue today to divide Americans, as opposed to real slavery that's going on right now in the United States. And I think it perfectly lines up with, if we want to get into the third clip, I think we're on clip number 3 now. Still on this, I believe it's
I
on
think
still
we're
on
on
the subject
4.
of immigration. We're on
Yeah.
4? Okay,
Yep.
we're on 4, yeah. It
We're
leads
on 4.
perfectly.
Undocumented immigrant is not a criminal. Being an undocumented immigrant is not a crime.
An undocumented immigrant is not a criminal.
An undocumented immigrant is not a criminal.
I've seen some of the worst of criminal behavior. I have seen the worst of crime. An undocumented immigrant is not a criminal. An undocumented immigrant is not a criminal.
An undocumented immigrant is not a criminal, and we have to correct course in this conversation.
Yeah, and I think we need to talk. I mean, obviously what she's saying is not true, but people will often say, well, being an immigrant isn't, or not all illegal immigrants are bad people. Like, what would you say to them?
Well, I would agree. Well, first, I guess the philosopher in me would be curious to say, okay, what do you define as bad, and where do you get right from wrong? Where's that rooted in? But if I was just to give a more of an off-the-cuff answer, I would say, sure, to assume that we are saying immigrant equates bad is a straw man argument that's not being honest, and it's being used to divide people in the United States. The reality is that immigration is a good thing when it's put in its proper place, i.e. through a good immigration system. To just flagrantly defy the law, to cross over the border, and then either to be, let's just say, incentivized to, you know, take a lot of Americans' tax dollars through these various programs, etc. That is not right, because number one, you're breaking the law. It's analogous to busting down someone's door, sneaking into someone's house uninvited. We all recognize that is wrong, right? There's nothing wrong with you saying, hey, can I come over for dinner? And I say, yeah, come in for dinner. There's nothing wrong with that. There's something wrong though when you try to sneak into the house and you know, take what I have. That's an issue. And so it's defying the law. What it also does for the American psyche, just for the people who are already here, is it tells us that we don't value the rule of law anymore, because all of a sudden, you know, we'll throw Americans into jail for protesting, but the guy who broke across the border, we'll give you a free phone, we'll give you money, we'll give you health care, we'll get you a job. It's this class system where the American taxpayer is now a lower class that is supposed to give money through a system and basically, if you will, feed and incentivize this feed a higher class, a class of, if you will, untouchables that are not untouchables in a bad sense, but impeccable. They can never be criticized, because if you do, you're racist. You see the UK, they're doing this in a more extreme form. People just making tweets online and being thrown in jail.
Yes.
It's insane. That's
coming for us. I mean, we're not that far off. Like I think of people who have been visited by by these agencies for virtually nothing here in the US too. I mean, it's crazy. It's very Orwellian. Like, I know people have been saying that since 2020, but it really is. And people would do well to get caught up on good classic literature and history so that we can avoid these mistakes. And I think to this point that legal immigrants are angry with illegal immigrants is a really important point too, because I'm very Irish, like tons of Irish ancestry, like mostly Irish. And my ancestors came here legally.
Mhm.
And I have nothing. I have a sister that lives on the border in El Paso, and my nieces and nephew, they're half Mexican. Is that like a problem to me? No, because their family came here the right way, and they're not imposing on our taxes, and they're not taking things from us that they shouldn't be taking. They have come in here and they are Americans. They have citizenship, and that's a great thing. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's important too, because there are people who are doing the right thing, putting in the work, and then other people don't do that and they get all the benefits.
They do. Now, if you guys would have noticed on the clips that we just showed, this last one, there was a bunch of images of young children that was on the right-hand side of the screen. Those children are the victims of crimes of illegal aliens who have come across the border and have killed them, engaged in actions that you can't even, describe here on YouTube without, automatic flagging, etc., that kind of stuff. Very, very heinous crimes. And the reality is a lot of these individuals are prosecuted and let back out into the system in a lot of these blue states, or they find their way to sanctuary cities. One clip that I was trying to find, but you can find it in certain places on YouTube, is Kamala Harris when I think this is when she's DA of San Francisco, bragging about the fact that they are a sanctuary city and that she is proud of that she glories, if you will, in that reality. How can we take that seriously and say, okay, she's at the moment in this DNC convention trying to assuage the fears of voters and saying, we will tackle this immigration problem. You've had 3.5 years to tackle this. It's been incentivized by you.
Mm-hmm.
All that this talk now is literally just talk to try to get moderates to jump back on her bandwagon because she knows she's losing that issue. But what I really, really hate about this is the fact that while she did nothing, but now is saying that she'll do something, Americans were losing their lives. They were losing their lives through crime, through sexual abuse, and through fentanyl. And nothing was being done about it. And if you criticize them, they strawman you and say, well, you're just a racist. I don't care what skin color you are. If you come into the United States and you are intentionally trying to harm the civilian population, then you are what we would call, right, a foreign, if you will, adversary to the United States in some form or fashion. If it's your desire to come and spread drugs into the society, what do you say to that?
So it's super interesting because I just had this thought, and often I tend to look at things through the lens of abortion, because that's been so much of my work since I was in college. But and two things come to mind is how prevalent false compassion is on the progressive side of things. I would like to give many of them the benefit of the doubt. And not so much the people that are like way up there, like Kamala Harris. I don't think it's authentic. Right. I don't think it's authentic compassion, but for like the guy on the street that you're standing next to when you're pumping gas at the gas station, maybe they really do feel a sense of compassion for these people, and it's misguided, right? And I think too, what I find fascinating is that Democrats will say that unborn children are parasites, and that nobody should be forced to nourish and take care of this parasite. You should be able to dismember it. But people who are crossing the border and using all of our resources and we're being forced to pay for them, that's perfectly acceptable, even though we don't have a natural relationship with those people. We have a natural relationship to the unborn child that we helped create, we co-created. And yet that child can be dismembered because a woman should never be forced to sustain the life of another person, according to the left. But we are all collectively being forced to sustain the lives of these other people because they're human beings. It's like, well, okay. Like the unborn are human beings. These preborn children are human beings that we ourselves created. We have a natural relationship with them, and they're citizens.
Yeah,
They're
it's
natural born citizens. And then we have other people that we're being forced to take care of that we have no natural relationship with.
exactly. I mean, you see in New York State the fact that there are schools that are having to give up their school buildings, or hotels that are being, if you will, rented
Minnesota
out.
too. Yeah, hotels
Exactly.
are being filled with illegal immigrants that we're paying for right now. And it's like
Exactly. It's like
down on
you
the
have to,
low key here in Minnesota. Yeah.
yeah, it's insane. Like you'll have to pay for this, but at the same time, people who are naturally born in your own country, second class citizens. And so this is a major issue that we've seen, whether it's immigration or whether it's even just let's just say trade or abortion. We see the downplaying of just Americans at every turn for everybody else. Why? Is it because these individuals in Washington have massive hearts for people? Is Washington known for having massive hearts for people? I don't think so. The reality of the issue is this: they care about what does their handlers want to say, what do their donor class want them to say, multi-corporations, what do they want them to say, etc. And they want to have some type of blending together, if you will, of the entire system. And it's absolutely insane. Now, it leads perfectly into this next clip that we're going to show, because naturally we see the injustice of what's going on and we're saying, yo, this is not right. And naturally we want to defend ourselves. And I'm not advocating anarchy here or vigilantism or anything like that, but I do believe in self-preservation. That's just a truth of the natural law that's rooted in reason. And so naturally in our own society, we have to protect ourselves with modern technology, which happens to be firearms. And so when we look at, for instance, the two positions, Trump clearly is in line with, I would say, I would argue, as someone who's very, very right wing when it comes to firearms. He has a more mainstream rational position of let's keep essentially the system as is, etc. Whereas Kamala, she is basically the female Beto O'Rourke in this situation. If you guys infamously remember when he got up on stage and said, hell yeah, we're going to take away your AR-15s, your AK-47s. We haven't heard much from him in Texas, thank goodness, because, he decided his position with guns is hilarious. He was like, at first in 2018, when he was running against Ted Cruz, he was like, yeah, we just need to have some rational gun reform, etc. And, he lost, but he was in Texas, so he knew he was going to lose. Then he goes to, presidential race as a loser. And he says, I'm going to run for president. And then he goes full lib mode. He's like, no, we need to ban all assault weapons, which we'll get into what that is in a second. And lost. He was pretty far down. And then decides to run for governor, right? Third time's a charm, I guess, in his mind, here in, 2022. Lost by 11 points, so even greater loss than against Ted Cruz.
Ouch.
And at first he was like, yeah, no, we need to have, I'm pretty fine with the Texas gun laws. They're all right. Maybe just a little tweaking here and there. And then of course we had the very tragic shooting that took place in, I believe it was February or March of that year. It was early. Forgive me, I can't remember the exact dates. However, he decides to go and storm a meeting with Greg Abbott. You can find that clip online. It's a sad situation that should not be minimized, and it was improper what he did. But what I find humorous in a good sense was the way that one of the gentlemen at the meeting responded, where it's like this old kind of pot-bellied, stereotypical Texas superintendent who just kind of gets up there. He's not running for politics, so he didn't care. He basically just cusses him out and tells him to get out of the room. It was pretty funny. It was just like, as a Central Texan, not too far away from where the shooting happened, it was like, yeah, it's one of me telling him off. It was pretty nice. So, but yeah, let's get into this next clip, because I think the next one's on guns, if memory serves.
Yep.
And they want to ban books. While you tried to create safe and welcoming places where our children can learn, extremists attack our freedom to live safe from gun violence.
Yeah, I think in part of the clip, she says, we want to ban assault weapons. They want to ban books, which I'm like, okay, it doesn't take more than literally 5 minutes of research to recognize that we're wanting to ban porn in schools. Okay. Like going back to just basic, human decency, it's probably a bad idea. I don't know. Maybe this is old fashioned, but to be showing pornography to third graders and being like, hey, Jimmy, this is what this is. I mean, that's insane. And
As a
juxtaposing
mom, yeah.
that we don't care about children's safety is insane.
As a mom and a homeschooling mom, I have, I've mentioned now I have 5 born kids. I have another one on the way due in October, but my oldest is 9 years old. She just turned 9. And I cannot tell you how impressionable her young mind is. And the way, like, if we go to the library and she saw a picture of one of those doctor masks from the Black Plague. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Oh,
They
yeah.
look like bird
Mhm.
beaks.
Yeah.
She couldn't sleep. She stayed up one
Yeah.
night crying because it scared her so much. And that's just with like scary stuff. And then what happens when you introduce sexual stuff? I mean, I can't even, I'm like, these people are so evil. They're so nefarious, and they know that they have to know they are grooming these kids. I mean, I don't care who you are. These kids are impressionable. You cannot ever unsee something. When you see it,
Yeah.
it's embedded into your brain. And I just, yeah. So anyway, yeah, you are exactly right. Sorry to get off on
Yeah.
that tangent, but it's like,
No,
it
I
just
fully agree with
highlights
you.
the point.
I fully agree with you. And that's why it makes me mad, because it's like you are basically saying, oh, they want to ban books, not telling what are in the books, and juxtaposing that to, but they don't want them to be safe. They just want people to, show up in schools with machine guns and hang out. I mean, like, what is this nonsense? And so it's dishonest, number one. It's just political pandering, but it raises these two good issues. So number one, we've kind of touched upon it already, but the reality is that they have no issue with essentially pornography being introduced into schools. That's what's going on. I remember when I was in, let's see, 7th grade, I believe it was 7th, 8th grade. I worked for a few years as just a volunteer at the local village library, right? Very good, wholesome library. And, I went there as a kid, and you have story time, and, there would be all like the kind of like the local people that would come out to perform. Sometimes it would like, magic tricks, or they bring the animals, and it was very wholesome village library. But then I remember we got later on a young adult section added into the library. And I was kind of tasked as a helper of just, organizing the books on a practical level, just categorizing them. And the lady who became the head of it was, a flaming progressive. And I remember in 7th or 8th grade, somewhere in there, stalking the books and being like, what the heck are these books here? Opening up the books and them being drawings of pornography, straight up. And this is out in the middle of the room, out for anybody to just walk up to. They're not behind a glass case. You don't have to reach up really high. No, they're just there. They're just right there at eye level, and you can just grab them. And this is in Central Texas, that anyone can just walk up and grab to. So you know what I did? I don't think I've ever told this story. I just took the books and threw them away. I didn't tell anybody. I was like, this is evil. This is, you don't just show this to children. I mean, I was in 8th grade. I was like, what the heck is this? And these
Little
were
pious
books.
Nicholas Cavazos throwing library books away.
I threw them away because I was like, I mean, I distinctly remember they weren't like romance novels. Some of them were essentially like young adult, like life books, where it was like, okay, let me give you instructions because you're forming now and you probably don't know what's going on. So this is what you do. This they want to give to children. They want to expose this to children from an early age because, as you said, children are impressionable. But they juxtapose this to this discussion on guns. They want to take away man's protection for himself. They give this impression that the Second Amendment is there for hunting and fishing, and that's why the founders had them, which is a lie, because if you didn't hunt or fish back then, you weren't eating. You didn't just go down to the local grocery store and get your processed foods, right? You didn't eat. It was there to protect the civilian population from oppressive government. That's what they say in the Federalist Papers, which they don't want people to read or teach anymore. That's what's written in the discussions around the formulation of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights. They don't want to mention that anymore. And so what they want to do is they know they can't get rid of it now, right? Because Kamala, as much as she would like to do, a door-by-door seizure of guns, that's not going to happen. If she tried to attempt that, that's Civil War 2.0 immediately in America. It would never happen because we have more firearms than anybody in the country, thank goodness, or in the world.
In the world, yep.
In the world, thank goodness we do. But what they'll do is they'll say, okay, by incrementalism, we'll go after assault weapons. What are assault weapons? Well,
They don't even know.
In their mind, I think it's any gun that looks scary. I think that's essentially what it is in their mind, because typically as a gun owner myself, all you really have to do is just say, well, what is an assault rifle? And they'll just say, it's one of those
An
AR.
Yeah, I was going to say an AR-15 or 17 or 19. They can never get the number quite right. But
I've seen Sheila Jackson, God rest her soul, she's passed away, but she was a very insane liberal U.S. representative from a district around in Houston. And what she famously said was it was after one of these tragic mass shootings. She said, I went and I held an AR-15 in my hands, and it weighed as heavy as 10 boxes. And the round it shot, a 50 cal, round that it shot. And I just busted out laughing because anyone who's ever owned a firearm knows how insane that is. First off, an AR-15 is like maybe 5 pounds at most, even with the magazine in it. But number two, the big clue is an AR-15 round, a 5.56 round or 2.23. It's about like this big or so. 50 cal bullets like this big. It's like 7-8 inches, if not more. So I'm like, you clearly don't know what you're talking about. And so I think what they want to do is they want to portray guns as scary, right? Guns as bad, as opposed to having a legitimate, good, and healthy gun culture. A good and healthy gun culture is not what we do now, which is like, for instance, hyper glorifying violence. I do think that that's an actual issue in the United States, is hyper glorifying violence, as opposed to telling, historical narratives that include battles and things. Glorifying that, or not exposing, I would say, children with good teachers at proper ages to the notions of self-protection that include firearm safety, promoting firearm safety, promoting firearm training, and then on practical levels, implementing these things in the context of school, implementing also teachers on how to protect themselves from these insane people. Also, of course, we could go off into the discussion of, and I won't touch on it now because it's another tangent, but why a lot of these school shootings go on. Of course, there's mental health involved, but there's also the reality of, well, you took prayer out of schools, you teach children that they're descendants of animals, and then you're all of a sudden surprised when they act like animals. You don't teach them virtue. And when you also add in things like the horrid dating scene for young people today, it's like, okay, you have all of these external factors adding on top of each other that make it terrible. So what she would like to do is ban assault weapons, which is code language for ban any weapon that can essentially carry more than 10 rounds in its magazine.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's just the beginning, right? Because you mentioned this incrementalism, and I totally agree with you. I have my concealed carry permit. I have a couple of guns myself, and to me, it's a great equalizer.
Yeah.
It's a great equalizer, especially when I'm pregnant or distracted with a bunch of kids. That's something that I think about. In fact, recently, we've seen an uptick here in the area that I live in stalking and possible abductions. One of my best friends was followed through the store by 2 men. I won't say where it looked like maybe they came from, but they didn't look like locals. I'll say that. And she was followed through the store, and I thought to myself, geez, like if that were me, I would really pray that I had my gun on me that day. Thankfully she was smart enough to ask for help before she went back out to her car. But like, that's another reason why women of all people should be advocating for their Second Amendment right. Is it's an equalizer for you and your children. So yeah,
it is. And it's one thing where people have to realize, like, when we look at the history of the United States, we see that the first attempt of introducing gun control into the United States was post-Civil War Democrats in the South who didn't want Black people to get firearms. Why? Because, as you said, it's an equalizer. They didn't want that reality taking place, and so they were attempted to do, you need to be, you have to have a zillion and one background checks, and you have to have a certain amount of white people sign off that old Jim can get a firearm and things like that, which is insane. It's treating them in the same racist attitude.
I'm not racist. I have 5 white friends.
Yeah, it's just insane. It's insane stuff like that where you're like, what is going on? But that's just what you have. And I think that the sad reality is that when you look at the intention of the founders, this is why I say I'm pretty right wing on this issue, is that the founders today, if they were here, do you know what they would be doing with firearms? They would be in an Abrams tank with a keg of beer, hunting deer. That's what they would be doing. Because if you read the lives of the founding fathers, they were some wild dudes who really liked just kind of living wild lifestyles. Even though this individual is not a founder, but a good president in many ways. He had some really bad racial policies, but Andrew Jackson, he would notoriously, like, he and his boys would go to the bar and they would just have a wild night, and then they would immediately go out from there and like fight a battle or something like that. He would engage in duels and stuff with his enemies, and people of course called Trump unpresidential, whereas like we have presidents who are engaging in duels and stuff, which is funny. So point being though is that I think that we just need to have a much more healthy gun culture and recognize that, yeah, if you're wanting to protect yourself, not just from criminals, illegal aliens, but also if the government really tries to crack down and do something insane, that's when you need
COVID. Sorry, if there's like another pandemic or where like you're locked in your homes or something. And and speaking of all of that, I mean, here in Minnesota, cities literally burned. I mean, Minneapolis was burned to the ground, and some of those people were coming out of the cities towards the suburbs. I live like 35-40 minutes outside of the cities, and we were concerned that certain pockets near me were going to be up in flames with gunfights and fires because of the chaos that erupted at that time. So yeah, I mean, did we have our guns ready, locked and loaded? Yes, we did. Yeah, it's something insane. I think to transition to this though, because we're kind of building on this notion of just like the lack of genuine care, I believe the next clip is our first clip on the discussion of the economy, if memory serves. Yeah, so let's go ahead and take a look at that and kind of dive into that discussion.
Of groceries, housing, and other essentials for many Americans.
As president, I will take on the high costs that matter most to most Americans, like the cost of food. A loaf of bread cost 50% more today than it did before the pandemic. This election...
Speaking in the battleground state of North Carolina, Harris was making her first major economy-focused speech as the Democratic presidential nominee. She announced a sweeping set of proposals, including plans to introduce a federal ban on price gouging on food and groceries, to lower prescription drug costs and build more affordable housing.
Okay, but she called it price gauging. Number one, she doesn't know anything about the economy. And number two, she's been in office this whole time.
Yeah, I know.
Did you see that Donald Trump created an ad and it was just her saying that? And he's just clipped it and said, "I'm Donald Trump and I approve of this message." That's pretty good.
I love that Trump is back on Twitter. I love it so much. I'm not even on Twitter, but I've been tempted just to get a private account just to watch that because I'm just so happy he's back. But yeah, I mean, like, notice that kind of line that she gives. She says, "A loaf of bread costs so much more now than it did before the pandemic." I agree with you, but who was in charge before the pandemic? It was Donald Trump, your adversary. She's done nothing to fix the economy. Now, people can say, well, she wasn't the president, but you're the vice president. You're right there. You're right there calling the shots along with the president, and nothing's happened. So I think to get into a little bit with her economic proposals, rightly, we see left-wing publications coming out and scratching their heads, and they're like, there's some other countries that have tried to pull this, like, I don't know, say Soviet Union, right? So basically, for people who don't know what her main policy is, I'll focus this in on a really practical area of, for instance, groceries. So in her policy, what she wants to do is essentially engage in the stopping of price gouging, which will in effect produce the result of large corporations, because they're large, they're multinational, etc. They're able to keep their stores open, right? But smaller industries are going to suffer because they cannot, if you will, mess with the prices. They can't engage in things like that. And so the end result will be your mom and pop stores or your smaller grocery store chains, your local or maybe even national grocery chains, et cetera, that aren't multinational or billionaires, et cetera, are going to be closing. That's why I've even seen some liberals say this will just do nothing more than open up bread lines here in the United States, because what else can we do? I mean, if that's the case, as opposed to Trump's proposal, which is let's get rid of, first and foremost, the inflation by mass deregulation. So much of going to what you talked about earlier about the 08 crash, so much of this would be solved, and all of these recessions would be solved if we would just hyper deregulate the economy. It would, and it's not that the reality would flow forth from that, which would be, okay, competition can come in, invite all the businesses of the world and say, yeah, come start jobs here, right? And we're going to have very little messing around with what you guys do, as long as it's, ethical, of course. And you guys just compete with one another. That would lower the prices tremendously, because the American buyer would say, hey, I like Jim's proposal better than Bob's proposal because it's X, Y, and Z cheaper, etc. And so, but she doesn't want that to take place. She would rather have some type of insane economic proposal that would start bread lines.
I mean, her running mate is at least a socialist, and I don't think it's my understanding she's kind of a socialist too. For sure, her dad is. So, yeah, I mean, it's not really surprising that that's where her brain goes.
Yeah, get into a little bit of that, because again, you're in his state, Tim Walz's estate, and for a lot of people, I knew a little bit about him, but it was just a little bit, and it was only because I'm really invested into politics. But a lot of people are like, yo, who is this guy? I don't know who he is. Like, I mean, the other day, he's kind of getting trolled for this, but like the other day, he's like, I'm just your average Midwestern white guy. I like my crunchy, my hard shell tacos, and things along that nature. And kind of just trying to meme up the whiteness, I think, to appeal to a certain vestige of that boomer dim group that still
suburban white moms, probably. I mean, yeah, honestly,
suburban white moms who like back home. A lot of them can be like Hillary Clinton. Like, I'm sure Hillary Clinton was like, I mean, she talked about, having hot sauce in her handbag when she was talking with African Americans. And then she would break out into ebonics when she would go to the black church. And then, of course, famously, Bill Clinton, when Obama was running, he said, oh, we used to have guys like him serve us coffee in the morning at the governor's mansion. I'm like, oh, okay, I know what you're saying. So people forget these things, but they're out there. Or like, if people want, I mean, they could go on and on with this, but yeah, tell me about who is Tim Walz, for the average normie out there who doesn't know.
Well, he's a straight up socialist, and he'll say that what did he say? Some people's he referred to socialism as like being neighborly in one interview. I mean, that's really how he feels about it, and you can see it in his policy. His AG, Keith Ellison, is one of the most insane AGs in the entire country. He is on par with Kamala Harris, except he is probably a lot smarter than she is. And like all of these people, I mean, his whole administration is extremely anti-life, anti-anything remotely conservative. Tax dollar, like we ended up with a massive tax surplus, and like didn't get any of it back. most of it went to fraudulent organizations during COVID and things like that. I mean, it's more investment in education, which if anyone knows the history of why public education is what it is now, it is straight socialism. And it always has been. I think people sort of are aloof to the history of why we have public government sanctioned education in the United States. And it was to create citizens who would just be obedient to the government. And to minimize the role of parents in the lives of their children. So anyway, just all of that stuff, we're constantly investing in all of those things. But Tim Walz, I think one of the reasons that Kamala Harris selected him was because he's lesser known. You get someone like Gavin Newsom that everybody already knows. He's very suave and charismatic, and people kind of instinctually now sense there's something slimy about that. So we're going to go with the no-name guy from Minnesota, where people generally think of hot dish and just like Minnesota nice and 10,000 lakes. It's beautiful. We're just going to go with that guy, and we can create his image, except that hasn't gone very well for them so far. I don't think he's not really a likable guy, no matter how hard he tries. So he's not very likable. She's not very likable. It's just not a great campaign, but he is a straight up socialist. I mean, we have some of the highest taxes in the country, where we are a sanctuary state basically for immigrants. Very, very pro-abortion up to the day of birth. They actually no longer, you're not required to give life-saving treatment to any child born alive, even on if it's just a normal birth, and you discover that they are disabled, you no longer have to provide care for those children. You can let them die. It's just like absolutely horrifying, the policies that we have enacted. Yes, and we got tampon Timmy. We now have tampons in boys' restrooms. The state legislatures, the Democrats here, they don't refer to women as women. They are menstruating or birthing persons. They have completely stripped us of our dignity and our humanity here. And I've listened to it firsthand, testifying in committee hearings. This is how the Democrats talk about women. You are like birthing persons. You are menstruating person. You are no longer a woman. Women do not exist except for maybe Lay Finke or whatever his name is, the trans guy that's in our state legislature that also is super problematic. It's just it's super offensive. So like this is Minnesota. This is why my husband and I spent about a year trying to move out of state, and unfortunately that did not happen for us. So here we are. We're still here.
I want to get into a few of the things you said, because you're right. So I think you're right. She picked him because he is a no name. I think she picks him primarily because he satisfies a lot of those white boomers who don't like, people of color. It's funny because, again, in their warped world, if you were to say colored persons, that's offensive. But if you say people of color, literally just inverse it, then it's all of a sudden okay. It's these word games that they seem to play with, and you see this applied to women. So I think that she does that for that reason. I think it was a bad pick because, one, it's from a blue state, so it's not like you really gain that much, if you will. Two, he doesn't seem to be the most likable overall. But one thing that he's been criticized very hard for is, one, this whole issue when it comes to tampons in boys' restrooms, which, again, the media is trying to gaslight people and say, well, no, the state legislature and Governor Walz, they put in this policy because all they were trying to do was give tampons to public schools, right? I mean, you don't want your kids to be in public schools and not have access to this stuff, right? Overlooking the fact that they're putting this in men's restrooms, right? Which, dudes, let's be honest, that's not the problem that we have in the restroom. That's not our issue. And so therefore, that's insane. So if you can speak a little bit more about that. And then also,
I was going to mention too, the things that they initiated during COVID lockdowns were insane.
Yeah.
We did have we had a legit snitch line. In fact, people called on my father-in-law when we'd get together for Christmas and Thanksgiving, because my in-laws and our family, like we ignored all of it. There were no masks in sight, and we all have a ton of kids. And we were going to get together and we are going to enjoy each other's presence for holidays, and we're going to celebrate. But yeah, I mean, people were calling the snitch line. In fact, our deputy sheriff here in the county that I live in basically told all of them, mind your own business when people would call on us. Yeah, he was great. But yeah, there was a legit snitch line that Walz put together. And while the cities are burning and on fire, they actually had the National Guard going down and shooting people with paintballs if they weren't inside their homes. Because you can imagine, you have COVID, you have the pandemic, and then you have the George Floyd riots going on at the same time. It was chaos. It was chaos. And then meanwhile, you have Kamala Harris bailing people out. We do have stuff about that, but she was encouraging people to donate and bail criminals who were arrested during the riots out of jail.
She was.
And yep, she did that. She did. She has said that she has not done that. That's not true. She did that. And the governor too, like everybody was attacking our police force and everything. And so now our police force is dwindling. And it was so funny because then the police stopped working in these areas. And all of a sudden, these particular areas with high crime rates are going, where are the police? How come there's no more police presence here? There's no one to help us. It's like, well, you guys have been calling them pigs and trying to throw them in jail any chance you get. So yeah, I'm not surprised you had massive amounts of the police force go into retirement early because they were so done. They were just done with it and having no support from our governor or now our vice president. So yeah, I mean, it's just absolutely insane. He's a little Timmy dictator. I said we should have had it. I have a meme of him with Kim Jong Un's haircut, and he is Tim Jong Un or something. I don't know. It was really funny. Yeah, it was pretty good. Yeah,
I'm gonna send this in the private chat if you can put it up on the screen. This is my probably all-time favorite media piece of all time. The headline should tell you enough about how these people try to gaslight you guys. I love this headline so much because, again, this is just what the media likes to throw in your face. Black Lives Matter protests may have slowed the overall spread of coronavirus in Denver and other cities. New study finds. And this is from 2020 itself. This is
look at all those brave people. They're so brave.
Yeah, this is the insane thing. People get locked in their houses like criminals. As you said, there's snitch lines going on, right? But if you decide to go out and protest, that's all cool. It actually stops and slows the spread of COVID as the experts find.
Well, that was the thing, is like we could go into restaurants. We had to wear masks. I can't remember how many times people would stop me and be like, ma'am, you need to put on a mask. And I could walk to my table with a mask on and then take it off and sit down and eat. Like,
yeah, then
it's cool. Sit down the whole time. I'm like, wow, this is such an intelligent virus. It's amazing. That was another thing.
When we don't teach philosophy in schools anymore, at least in public schools anymore, and they're not like actually good philosophy that's talking about logic, the art of reasoning. No, we won't do that. We'll talk about showing pornography to children, and then you have to wear a mask, etc. And Trump actually, he gets a lot of flack. Some of it being deserved, some of it I think is hyperbolic. But about that whole situation, I have a lot of individuals who, when I'm showing them the realities of this insane reality that we might have Harris as president, they'll say, well, Trump in 2020, right? He's the one who shut everything down. I'm like, okay, yeah, fair. To also be fair, we didn't know what the heck was going on fully, just as us civilians, right, going forward. And then when it comes to, say, the infamous jab debate, people are correct. He is the one who kind of signed off and authorized, a lot of that research and a lot of that. But he didn't force people to take it. It was optional, and it was Dem governors as well as the Biden administration who wanted to mandate it and wanted to shut down businesses that would not mandate it if they had a certain number of employees, etc. And so, two different scenarios. I think it's fine to criticize him rationally, but blame the Biden administration. I mean, you guys remember the Biden administration in 2021? They had the Ministry of Truth. You guys remember that one? The Ministry of Truth, where they were like, okay, to combat fake news, We'll have a ministry of truth in the United
Yeah.
States.
Again, that Orwellian, like people talked about 1984 so much. It's like, yeah, it was almost like reading. It's if you haven't read 1984, it's almost like you don't even need to anymore because you lived it.
You
You
just
lived
watched
it.
it.
It just happened. My husband had to have papers to go out and work because my husband's a lineman. He's an essential worker. He keeps the power on, but he had to have papers with him when he was out working.
You have your
Seriously.
papers, please.
He had to
Oh,
have
man.
his papers in case he got pulled over or whatnot. I mean, it's crazy.
It's wild. Well, speaking of, I guess, dictatorships in some form or fashion, I think the next clip, if you have it, this one is her comments on North Korea. I don't know if you have that one.
Yeah.
It's loaded, but this is kind of funny.
Sorry.
You're good.
With the Republic of North Korea. And it is an alliance that is strong and enduring.
Oh, that was all. That was the whole clip.
Yeah, she says that we have an alliance with North Korea that's strong and enduring. Now, of course, this is a gaffe, right? We all make gaffes and mistakes. But you would hope that at least somebody who's potentially going to have access to the nuclear codes is going to know which country, which Korea we have an alliance with before they push the little red button. They don't send it to the wrong one. So it's really good. Now here's my whole issue, and this is for real people to consider. Do you guys realistically think that President Xi, right, Xi Jinping of China, or President Putin of Russia is going to be intimidated by Kamala Harris?
No, well, they're not intimidated by Joe Biden either. I mean,
they're not. But see,
Yeah.
the thing is, like, and I'm not saying this to be like demeaning, but I'm like, okay, these guys, they make fun of Biden behind his back. They're like, the Americans are literally dumb. They have a senile old guy in charge. But these guys are also going to be like, but now they put a psychopathic woman in charge. This is even more amusing. Let's make fun of this even more. I'm like, do you guys really think that they're going to be scared of this? And this is why, of course, famously, Trump is correct about this. There was no new wars under his administration, right? He was not interested in going to war. I still have some conservative people who think that, like, unless Trump is literally the reincarnation of St. Louis IX, that they're not going to vote for him. But I'm like, no, like, there was no new wars under his administration. We were actually trying to end wars, which we'll get into a little bit about wars as we kind of start to wind down here. But like, do we actually think that's going to be an issue, in her world? No, I think that she would love to promote wars. I think she would love to have some type of war pop off, because then she could be, I'm a wartime president. You have to support me for my reelection bid.
well, that's where we talk about the military-industrial complex, and there's the reality. We can support our military, but there is sort of this dichotomy within the military. There are many men and women who are there serving with a great deal of integrity, and then you have the complex that is driving all of this because there's a lot of money to be made in war.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And that's the scary thing. There's a lot of money to be made, and I think that she would love nothing more than to have some type of armed conflict, with Iran or something. And it scares me to death because, again, I'm 26 and I'm going to be one of those people where it's like, okay, you're young and healthy. We'll put you in,
Mm-hmm.
You're off the bench into the game.
Well, hopefully they when's your birthday?
My next birthday is in June of next year. You know what was so ironically funny, in a dark way? I, for a year, was joking with people, oh yeah, I'm almost out of the draft limit age. Let's go. I bet you, though, like the day before I turn 26, they're going to raise it. Literally 2 days before my birthday, June 6th, they raise it. And I'm like, that was real sad humor of mine. I cannot believe it.
There are no coincidences.
No.
Sorry.
And I was just, oh man, it's so bad. It's so bad. But I mean, that's just the reality. If she gets into power, that's what it's going to be. So
what do you want to pivot to? Yeah.
So let's talk about, I think, a little let's talk about, let's throw up, do you have the economy percentage slide that I sent you?
Yes, I do believe I do.
Yeah, so this
I
one's
do.
good just for a little discussion, a quick look see. So in the very small print that people cannot see, they can look up this image itself. But the Trump campaign has been posting this. These statistics go back to, as an example, labor statistics from the Bureau of Labor, etc. But when we look at this, we see under Kamala and Biden's administration, we see gas is up 51%. All of you guys in the chat and who watch this later can agree gas prices are insane, especially you truck drivers out there. You know what I'm talking about? It's insane.
Well, and I would love for people to post the highest number that they have seen in the last 4 years. We broke $4, I think, here in Minnesota, and that was like insane to me. I was obsessive for a very long time. It was like the first time in my life I started really paying attention to gas prices because I drive a lot for our homeschooling co-op, and to do other naughty things like buy raw milk, you know.
Oh no.
I'm a rebel child. Yeah. So, but
Uh-huh.
I would love for people to post like, what is the most that you spent on gas over the last 4 years?
Yeah, I think mine, like the highest it got here in Texas, because Texas, thankfully, we have a lot of oil, and our governor tries to deregulate as much as he can when it comes to gases. I think it got up to around $3.80. I think,
Wow.
and that was back in 2022 during the summer when it got really, really bad. That was still pretty bad. But when you think about it, it's like, okay, half of us in Texas drive pickup trucks. You know, so if you have a VA pickup truck and gas is like as it is right now, which is around $3.19. It's like, okay, well, you know, do the math. You're going to be easily getting $65, $70 a tank over and over and over again a couple times a week. You know, all that adds up, and it adds into some of this other stuff. When we look at it, you know, electricity prices, 32% increase in
And
the
those are only
last.
going to go up.
They're only going to go up. And one thing I want to emphasize this. The Trump tax cuts are set to expire in 2025, which means that if they are not renewed, all of these prices are going to go through the roof. And look, when you look at some of them, for instance, groceries, 22%, eggs, 47%. I love me some eggs in the morning, right? Most of you guys probably out there do as well. Those are going to go up exponentially. When we look at rent, right, Gen Z is really feeling this really hard right now. And that's why if you go on to even TikTok, you see Gen Z people talking about why they're wanting to vote for Trump because they can't afford rent anymore. And they're saying, why did I go into debt getting this essentially phony degree that I'm never really going to use because they want 20 years of experience, even though I'm 19 years old or something. And I can't afford to, you know, pay my bills for rent. And when we look car insurance, how can these young people afford car insurance? 54%. Gen Z, how are you going to be able to afford groceries, gas, rent, car insurance if the Trump tax
Home
cuts expire?
insurance is insane right now too. I mean, all of it is, yeah.
It's going to go insane. You know, K through 12 food up 66, right? So when we look up altogether, the central one, 20.2% prices up. This is insane. And it's only going to get worse, whether it's her economic plan or the expiration of the Trump tax cuts, because she's clear. She doesn't want to renew them. You know, it's going to be wild.
Yeah. And I mean, like I said at the beginning of the show, it's trying to feed a family of our size has, well, maybe more people need to talk to Rob Fatzinger or something, but it's like, it's really hard to eat well, like healthy, and raise a bunch of kids right now. I mean, like that's just a challenge right now. And I think a lot of people don't even think about it because not many people have big families anymore. I'm big, and I'm not even. I mean, 6 kids is like used to be an average, typical size family. It's not anymore, and part of it is this economy. A lot of people don't want to have kids right now because it's hard to.
Exactly.
Yep.
It's really, really rough, and I think it's so sad. Yeah, think about the single parents that have no choice but to work. So I have to make a decision between paying bills and putting food on the table. We're in a first world nation, and we're really having to wrestle with, okay, do I put food on the table or do I pay my bills? That is
Mhm.
insane. And so these individuals want people reliant on them. I mean, though it may sound hyperbolic, I don't think it's too far off to say, yes, people in power who do not care about civilians in the United States would rather have people in the pod, eating the bugs, watching pornography with their AI girlfriends, and not having children, as opposed to doing the quote radical edgy stuff, which is like, hey, can I have a bunch of kids? Can I go get some raw milk? Can I homeschool my children? You know, like those are apparently the radical extremist things to individuals who want to show pornography to children, etc. You know, it's just it's bizarre. Well, and that's why, you know, I think that free advice to anyone out there who works for the Trump campaign, the liberals right now are trying to say, oh, you know, Trump and Vance, they're weird. They're weird. They're trying to meme weird, which is, again, the left can't meme. But just respond. Yeah, we are weird in a world where people in power want to show porn to children, chemically castrate children before they can even decide whether or not they want to have a tattoo, you know, etc. You know, yeah, sure, we're weird if that's your standard of normal in this insane world. It's just it's so not right.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard people, let's see, a traditional Catholic says, I've heard people talk about how kids are too expensive. Kids are expensive. And that's where I think sometimes we have to acknowledge, like, yeah, that's true. That doesn't mean that's not worth it.
Yeah.
You know, they're worth every penny. But this is a reality, and it's always in every sort of depression and every sort of economic depression, you will always see a decrease in the fertility rate, and this is about the lowest we've ever seen it in the United States, is what it is right now. It's not even 2 kids per family. I mean, we're talking less than 2 kids per family now. And that's where we're at, and it's so unfortunate because, again, going back to that economic implications, is that now we have this, and I've talked about it doing pro-life work for a long time. This is one of the problems that China has, Japan, even some of these other cultures where girls have been aborted simply because they are girls, or you have a 1 or 2 child policy. So now your population is this inverted triangle with the elderly aging out and not enough people to financially support them. It's also why you see so many horrible, awful things going on in the medical system, because they simply don't have enough people to care for the elderly. And that's why euthanasia is becoming very popularized. It's a lot easier to kill people off than it is to have to take care of them, especially when you don't have the hands-on resources to do that. And then you don't have enough people contributing to the GDP, and you don't have an ROI in terms of the economy. And so what happens? Like, you're not setting your country up for success long term. Now that we really are struggling with this horrible fertility rate in the United States. So yeah, it's going to be, I don't know. I always, people say horrible things to me in public with my kids. And now my kids are old enough that they sort of understand that they're not welcome, or that we're unusual. And I'm always like, who do you think is going to be paying for you when you're retired? Like, who do you think is going to be taking care of you? It's going to be my kids. So if I were you, I don't know, maybe I would just can it.
Or it's just also the reality that it's like, as you probably know, but as some of you guys also know in the chat, the Planned Parenthood is giving free abortions and free mastectomies at the DNC right now. They've pulled up in their, portable, murder wagons, which is what they are. And that's what they're giving them. But what I find funny about that in the sense is that I'm like, okay, we are literally going to win this cultural conflict because you're sterilizing your children, murdering your children, or encouraging them to engage in relations that cannot produce children. Whereas all the rest of us are like, yeah, let's have a ton of kids. And right. And so we're just going to win by default because it's like,
it's going to be the first time that conservatives actually had a long game. Is that what you're saying?
It is, because it's like, we actually have a ton of kids. Like, I mean, I tell people, it's like, go to St. Mary's, Kansas, right? You guys in the chat who live there, you know what I mean? There's kids everywhere, right? There's kids everywhere because there's no contraception going on. And that's a good thing, because kids are a good thing. We should actually incentivize having children on a governmental level, right? We should encourage that and say, again, it goes back to making America great again in the context of our culture and saying in schools, let's not focus so much in on perversion. Why don't we say, you know what? Human sexuality is a good thing because it produces life, this crazy, beautiful thing called a living human being that has great worth and great dignity. Why are we, saying, oh, they're just a burden? Oh, well, why are they a burden? They're a burden because I can't go and serve my own pleasures. I can't go and have my, nerve endings in my head shooting off dopamine because that's my God. I don't want them to get in the way of that. That's essentially what it is.
There's no delayed gratification. And so like the internet has also, that's a whole nother thing, but boy, the internet has really stunted our capacity for delayed gratification and people, it's just it's a huge issue. Pornography, same thing. All of these things that are fast food, we have a fast food culture, and so yeah, we're just going to treat everything like we deserve it, and we deserve it right now. Like, go treat yourself, you deserve it. Like, yeah, okay. So anyway, but I digress.
No, you're good. I think to move on to the last few little subjects we have, we can touch upon this just really briefly, but do you have those slides of, I think it's from the Daily Wire, but if it's Kamala Harris's volunteer list where she asks people their preferred pronouns. So this is just a couple slides. So Kamala is asking basically people, do you want a job working with my campaign? This is what she has for her battlegrounds political. So he, him, she, her, they, them, X, M, Z, her, EM. I don't even know if I'm saying these right. Her.
We did this whole stream wrong. We did the whole thing wrong. We introduced ourselves and we forgot to tell everyone our pronouns.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. So our preferred pronouns, our racial identity, etc. Because apparently the only thing that really matters is the melanin content and our reproductive organ.
Just so you know, I'm more oppressed. So at least can we at least be clear on the hierarchy here? I am.
I don't know. I'm Hispanic.
Higher on the lower hierarchy.
I'm Hispanic and you're Irish, so that gives me at least a half a point. Gives me half a point. It's just so stupid. It's so stupid. But anyway, it goes to show you that this is what's going on, and they're promoting this type of stuff. And I think this leads into, so it's like, okay, they're doing this because a lot of Gen Z kids, because of social pressure, feel this alienation. But I would say, and I don't know if you have this clip, but the one on fracking, if you have the one on fracking, going into our discussion on energy a little bit more, Gen Z, one of the ways that we're just going to get around and go to college and get a job is by buying a car. And unfortunately, our cars need gas. And unfortunately, the only way we get gas is by things called fracking and drilling. And so is Kamala interested in fracking and drilling? What is her position on this?
And starting with what we can do on day one around public lands, right? And then there has to be legislation. But yes, and this is something I've taken on in California. I have a history of working on this issue. And to your point, we have to just acknowledge that the residual impact of fracking is enormous in terms of the impact on the health and safety of communities. Yeah, so thank you.
So would you ban offshore drilling?
Yes, and I've, again, worked on that.
Yeah, so she gets asked by that lady in the full clip, will you ban fracking? She says yes, and I've strived to do that in my positions as the senator of California. Then she gets that follow-up question, will you ban offshore drilling? Yes, I'm already trying to do that. Where are we going to get our energy from?
Well, but that's exactly it. We're just banning it here, and then we're buying it elsewhere.
Yeah,
like they're still doing it. We still need the oil.
Yeah, we'll go and raid other countries, start wars over there, get oil there. Or we'll talk about how women are oppressed here, but then we'll buy oil from the Saudis, or we'll buy oil from Venezuela while giving lip service to solving the immigration crisis, etc. But we don't want you guys to drill here. It's insane. Now, here's what my thought is. I'm totally fine if people want to experiment, they want to find other sources of energy out there. That's totally cool. I personally think that we actually need to invest a lot more in nuclear energy because nuclear power plants have improved a lot since, the Chernobyl days, if you will. There's been a lot of improvements and there's so much energy we can get. I think that if you want to invest in sun's, panels, that's cool. If you want to invest in wind and that's just what you want to do, okay, cool, go for it. But what I'm against is, one, forcing people unilaterally just to do one thing in this context that's not even necessarily moral, right? And it's going to harm people in the end. But then two, on top of that, we don't have any mechanism for sustaining an economy if we all of a sudden just ban fracking. Like, what is going to happen?
Well, and to this comment here about where are we going to get all this energy to run electric vehicles? Here are some of the problems that nobody wants to talk about with electric vehicles. And my husband and I talk about it a lot. As I mentioned earlier, my husband is a lineman. No, he doesn't play for the Minnesota Vikings. He is an electrical lineman. He works on the power lines. And so a lot of his work is building substations, making sure you have power in your home, moving lines that are above ground to underground, all of that stuff. And he'll be the first to say that nuclear energy is the cleanest source of energy that we have right now, that you can get like that. He agrees with you. What are we going to do with all of the electricity? We're going to ruin the grid, the electric grid for electricity. And that's why the last several years, they've talked about rolling blackouts because we're using too much electricity that we're not producing enough. And so we're taxing the whole grid and the whole system. If you don't have a generator, you should go get one. That kind of a thing. Like, I'm not kidding. You should. We have one. And my husband could work on our lines right outside our house. But if the whole grid is down, you're in trouble. And so, yeah, we have a huge issue with that, but also solar panels, electric cars, these batteries, how those batteries are sourced is super unethical. And then not only that, but long term, these things are not biodegradable. The batteries, the solar panels, they're not good for the environment at all. So you're just replacing one problem with another. No one has figured out how to, quote unquote, recycle or dispose of these things once they're done. They don't just work indefinitely. They don't just go on forever and ever. You have to find a way to deal with these things when they're done, when their service is up and they no longer work. And for some reason, that's never talked about. So we're still ruining the environment. You're just doing it with solar panels and these batteries, and you're exploiting people in poor countries to get you things like cobalt and all these other materials. So exactly. Like, this is a problem. Nobody's talking about it. We're just going to pretend like this is cleaner energy, and it's not.
Exactly. And as you wisely pointed out, it exploits the people in these foreign countries, and at the same time it hurts us as workers here in the United States because it puts us down for, again, the political maneuverings of these individuals. And it goes into, do we have the clip on her statement on the Green New Deal? Because if we do,
I might be able to pull it up. This might have been one of the ones, because he sent me so many. My streaming platform actually told me I was at my limit. I can pull it up here, though. Here we go.
StreamYard, bro, you guys gotta do better.
Congress, here's my point. If they fail to act as President of the United States, I am prepared to get rid of the filibuster to pass a Green New Deal.
So in her worldview, she wants to, if necessarily, get rid of the filibuster, so get rid of a real important facet, if you will, of the Senate procedures, to pass a Green New Deal that will cost multi-trillions of dollars, as opposed to just, just drilling, because apparently you're against fracking, you're against offshore drilling, but you are for buying from other countries, you are for imposing a Green New Deal, etc. These are what she wants to do in a time in which gas prices are off the charts. So people need to recognize this. Like, when we're talking about why Kamala Harris will destroy America, she does not care if people come into the country illegally, because as we've seen from her own lips, they're not criminals. It should just be a civil offense. That's it, right? She's not going to she's had 3.5 years to tackle this issue, as the borders are. She's failed on this. She clearly doesn't want the economy to roar because prices are up. She even admits that they were better. The prices were better prior to 2020, but she's just going to impose a Soviet-style tax upon, regulation upon the food industry and other industries, which is going to gouge the economy. And then we see when it comes to energy, she's wanting to promote essentially a full-blown socialist policy of let's just not drill for anything, which what that's going to do to our energy industry, it's going to completely destroy the energy industry. So thousands, multi-tens of thousands of jobs out of the loop.
Unless you're a lineman. my husband has great job security right now.
Yeah, it's a good thing that you're not like in West Virginia and you're a coal miner or something like that, because
Right.
there's a reason why they vote very heavily for Trump is because I mean, there's some real issues that we have out there. So,
but what's interesting is that here in Minnesota we have the Iron Range, and so there's been historically a lot of mining here in Minnesota, and our miners tend to vote fairly blue. I guess I don't totally understand why that is, but they seem to be fans of Tim Walz. I think Tim Walz has kind of kept hands off with them though. But it makes me wonder what will happen on the national stage if he will maintain his sort of friendly approach with the miners to keep their vote, or if he will have to acquiesce under a Harris regime. Like he would have to partake in that. So I don't know. I wonder what'll happen there.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. As we finish, let's get into the last few clips. So the last few clips that we're wanting to look about, one will still touch upon a subject here in the States in domestic policy. This is the subject of her approach to private insurance. Before you think that like, oh, that sounds super boring. Essentially, if you want to have any type of insurance, whether that's medical or other, outside of a government institution, she's not interested in that. And so we have a clip of her talking about her view when it comes to private insurances, etc. And if you have it, we can play it. But it's honestly just really, really wild.
Plan to get rid of private insurance companies.
The bottom line and the most important is that everyone have access to health care. That is the goal.
I believe it will totally eliminate private insurance. So for people out there who like their insurance, they don't get to keep it?
Let's eliminate all of that. Let's move on.
Just eliminate it all, just move on, right?
If you like your doctor, you can keep him, right?
Exactly.
It's just what's old is new again.
These people, again, and what's so sad to me is that, there should be healthy competition. You should not be forced to just, okay, yeah, let's just get rid of it entirely. Do you really think in the worldview of the founding fathers or of the pioneers who went out west or the great ship salesmen that went around the world that they thought that the government should hyper-regulate everything that they did? Because the last time I checked, we fought a war over a tax on tea and stamps as
I
opposed
know
to
what happened to us. We have grown weak as Americans.
We got really soft and we listened to, I think a lot of it had to do with bad education because
we were the most literate country in the world before government schools. Like people don't understand that. The the people who wrote, the men who wrote all of our founding documents, which are incredible documents, they were homeschooled. They were schooled within the community. It wasn't like they had government schools back then. They didn't. And it's so vastly different now. I mean, most kids can't even figure out what gender they are.
I know. It's like you see that like in some schools, they're literally putting litter in the rooms because they're like,
we've
okay,
had
some people
schools like
identify
that
as
here. We've had schools like that
wild.
here in Minnesota. Mm-hmm.
I was homeschooled, thank the good Lord. And, it's like people that pretty much the only argument against homeschooling that people give nowadays is just, oh, don't you think your kids are going to be socially awkward or are you raising them in some kind of cult or something? And I'm like, thank the good Lord that in my homeschool co-op, we did not have to worry about litter in one room for one kid and pornography being shown to us during recess and tampons in our bathroom. We didn't have to worry about any of that. We only had to worry about whether or not we were going to ace the test and whether or not we were actually doing a good job as students. That's what we were worried about.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't any of this nonsense. But this is the issue. So it's like, okay, let's, in her worldview, ban private insurance. What does that do to the state? It makes every individual dependent upon the federal government for everything. when it comes to this discussion. And so your your personal liberties, if you will, are completely gone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. And she's open with this, and that's what I think that's insane. So to finish, so I guess we only have like I think we have like 2 clips left. Yeah. Okay. So to finish, I want to talk about 2 things. So one is still touching a little bit upon domestic policy, but it's her infamous statement where she calls ICE, right, which is our immigration customs agency, etc. She alludes to the fact that in her worldview that they're basically the Ku Klux Klan. You know, they're basically the KKK in her mindset. And so if we have that clip, we can go ahead and pull this up. This comes from a Senate hearing, I think in 2019, of an appointment under the Trump administration of an ICE head.
Of many about how the power and the discretion at ICE is being used to enforce the laws? And do you see any parallels?
I do not see any parallels between sworn
I'm talking about perception.
officers and agents.
I'm talking about perception.
I do not see a parallel between what is constitutionally mandated as it relates to enforcing the law.
Are you aware that there's a perception?
I see no
Are you aware that there's a
that
perception?
puts ICE in the same category as the KKK. Is that what you're asking me?
And she continues to go. She continues to go at him with that. And what makes me so furious about this is, again, number one, these are individuals who put their life on the line, protecting our country, fighting against illegal immigration, fighting against drugs, fighting against the sex trafficking. And apparently they're just right up there with the grand poobah of the KKK in her worldview. And all this does is it's nothing more than Marxist division of people and saying, oh yeah, ICE equals let's go after brown people. If you actually believe that, you're just not smart. But really what you're doing is you're trying to pit Americans against other Americans. That's all you're doing.
Well, that's all that you're doing, but too, it's so dishonest. Like Margaret Sanger legit spoke at KKK meetings, and Margaret Sanger is one of Kamala Harris's heroes. Like she doesn't care. You have somebody who legit, I mean, New York, they abort more African American babies than are born alive every year. Yeah. She doesn't care about that. It's so fake. It's just, again, it's like the false compassion. We have a narrative. You're racist, and that's like the worst slur out there now. If you are called a racist, that's the worst thing you could be. It actually makes me think of Matt Walsh's movie that's coming out in theaters. I'm tempted to go see it. Am I racist?
I want to see it.
It looks pretty funny. It looks pretty funny.
I'm so excited for this movie just because even in private Protestant schools growing up, I had to endure multiple times teachers and students who explicitly said that all the problems in the world go back to white straight men, even in that context in conservative Texas. And I'm like, that sounds familiar. It sounds like another group who likes to say that, I don't know, there's a certain group of other people out there who all the ills in society go back to this group. I mean, it's the same thing. It's just a different boot, if you will. But what it makes me frustrated is, again, is she's playing upon the ignorance of individuals who maybe they don't know what ICE is out of just maybe they've not studied it or whatever, or maybe they've been given a false impression of it. And she's pitting great men and women of law enforcement against individuals who are saying, yeah, let's just bust through the border, or drug traffickers peddling their dope across the border, or sex traffickers peddling people across the border. The fact is, if she actually cared about the citizens of this country, would be empowering ICE to do what President Trump wants to do, which is the largest mass deportation that we've seen in the U.S. history, which has been done before in the past, by the way. It's not just a pipe dream. President Eisenhower famously did it back in the 50s. And so it can be done. And I think it leads into our final clip, which is on this discussion of supporting men and women in service industries, if you will, to this country. Her debacle that she, I think, preemptively took credit for before it really went off the hinges of the Afghanistan withdrawal, and her really bad comments about that. It's honestly shocking when you see it.
Were you the last person in the room?
Yes.
And you feel comfortable?
I do. He is someone who I have seen over and over again make decisions
based on what he truly believes, based on his years of doing this work and studying these issues, what he truly believes is the right thing to do.
Yeah. So she's asked about Afghanistan. She's like, yeah, I was the last person in the room. I feel comfortable with the decision. What this makes me scared about is that people have to understand Afghanistan Pashtun culture, right? It's a very honor-based society. It's good in many respects. I wish we had more of that here, as opposed to showing children pornography or giving children iPhones at 8 so that they can just have unfiltered access to the internet, etc. So they have a very honor-bound society. And when President Trump and the Taliban made the deal, when you make a deal in that society, you keep to the strict code of the deal, and you don't diverge from that, right? Without mutual consent, you keep to that deal. And Biden, right, decided to move up the date of withdrawal. Why? Just literally to score political points and say, I got out earlier than Trump wanted to get out. Look at me, which is offensive to the minds of the Pashtun people, because you're breaking the deal. And so, of course, they go full bore. They take over
It
the
was
country.
so much worse than that, though. I mean, they left people, they left military weapons,
Billions of dollars.
Billions of dollars of our wasted, again, tax dollars. Yeah, I mean, it was so much more than just that. I mean, honestly, whether or not it was offensive to them, I don't really care. I do care that men and women were left, or that our missiles, all kinds of stuff, all of our weaponry was like left there and forgotten about. It's just
It
like
was the 13
we
plus
just gave it away to a bunch of terrorists. It's like, okay.
Yeah, it was the 13 plus that lost their lives because of that
Yeah.
ISIS bomber that went in there. And it's like, has Biden actually come forward and said their names or had a public honoring of them? No. In fact, the families have gone and spoken at the RNC and told about the reality. Like, the Biden administration has not cared about them. One theme that you'll see, and this is what we'll say is, I think, as we close, one theme that you can see with all of these things is that the reason that why Kamala Harris will destroy America if she gets in is because she does not care about Americans. America is not just a place of mountains and deserts and fields and valleys and rivers. It is a people, right, who have our own unique history, our own unique values, who are welcoming to other individuals who want to come and participate in this grand story. But we're also people of laws and a people of culture and a people that want to preserve those said things. And she does not care about those things. So whether that be in the immigration, where for 3.5 years she has done nothing, and she has allowed, statistics say, upwards of 10 million illegal immigrants to cross in the last 3.5 years. It's only going to get worse. To the fentanyl crisis, the sex trafficking crisis, to pitting Americans against Americans when it comes to guns versus porn in schools, to let's get rid of all private insurance. Let's ban fracking. Let's ban offshore drilling. Let's promote a Green New Deal, which is multiple $1 trillion worth of extra stuff. Let's get rid of the Trump tax cuts, which economists say is going to increase the prices of all of these goods and services by at least 4 times. It's going to be off the wall insane, because we're basically going to be hyperinflation, but then going back to like a 2016 style policy. All of these things together are really going to destroy it. And Gen Z, you're not going to be able to have any type of future American dream, because you're not going to be able to pay for it. And trust me, even if you could scrounge enough money up to buy bread, it doesn't really matter, because know that the rest of your money is being taxed to go and house illegal immigrants in the condo down the street. So my challenge for everybody is this: like them or loathe them, Trump exposed the corruption that is going on. And to be fair, at least in my short life, he was the best president that we've had, because he has at least tackled the system head on. I'm not saying he's a saint or has been perfect. No one actually claims that, right? Etc. That's just a meme.
I don't know. No, there's a segment
there's definitely a few people
that
out
kind
there.
of there is Trump worship, and so that's where I'm more moderate. I agree with you. But yeah, we need to be sober minded, and unfortunately, even if look at the options we have right now. I mean, you have to be sober minded.
He's the same candidate, and it's like, okay, what do we have before us? The renewal of the Trump tax cuts in 2025, which is going to stave off this insane inflation. mass deportations of illegal immigrants that are pulling, if you will, the lifeblood of the country away by the introduction of drugs and of crime and of overall just a tax burden. We will actually see the military respected and not just influenced by just a bunch of woke policies. We'll see, of course, drilling when it comes to fracking, when it comes to offshore drilling. Gas prices hopefully will get down to a more sane price, which means that food prices will go back down when transportation prices go that way. There's so many more issues that can be solved. And so this is my personal challenge, this Nick's challenge. A lot of you guys know that I, as well as I think it's about 25 of us now, a group of guy friends and myself from all different states, are going to be hitting, it looks like, the state of Pennsylvania in the month of October to do work for President Trump and try to get out the vote. My challenge for everyone is this: go vote for Trump, but then also get your friends to go vote, because what you see right now online is a massive astroturfing campaign of push polls, many of which are literally, if you just read the actual fine writing between them, are push polls where they're oversampling Democrats. They're trying to demoralize you people. You can't let them do that. Go out there, vote, get your friends to vote, go legally harvest a few ballots, go knock on some doors, right? Give $10 or something to the campaign. Actually do something, as opposed to just saying, oh, well, it's all hopeless, I can't do anything. That's my first challenge. My second and final challenge is this: if Trump gets into office, it's incumbent upon all of us to make America great again, but in the ways that I outlined that we can do. It's not just voting for one guy to go fix all problems. That's not going to happen, right? What we got to do is we have to say, what are we going to do in our local areas? Maybe some of us run for office, whether it's the school board or for the sheriff or for the mayor or city council. Maybe it's people in homeschooling communities or teachers in public schools saying, you know what, let's actually start having conversation about talking about promoting the 4 cardinal virtues again, right? Let's talk about introducing temperance to children as opposed to degeneracy, prudence as opposed to just follow your dreams, right? Justice, real justice, as opposed to a false justice that doesn't have any type of eternal connection to anything. Let's promote fortitude as opposed to all of you guys being, scared kids that can't get off of, the internet, etc. Let's get to that. So it's incumbent upon all of us to make America great again in the objective sense of that term. And it can be done. And I think that will be a great gift that you'll be able to pass on to your children and to future generations. So that's kind of my pitch for everybody, to go do that and recognize that, we are in a really serious situation. It's important to go vote. It's important to go and campaign.
Yeah, I don't have really much to add to that, except for that you don't want an entire country that is run like Minnesota. So please, for your own sake, there's a reason we have a really high rate of Minnesotans moving out of this state. And the data doesn't bear it out, because we have so many immigrants moving here, that it sort of masks the mass exodus that's going on. But there is an exodus happening. And so, yeah, you don't want that for your whole country. So I concur. I mean, I don't think I'm quite as pro-Trump as you are, but I do see him as basically our only option. And there's just no doubt about it. We had more peace in the world when he was in office. We were able to advance some great pro-life policy. I really don't like the way he's thrown pro-lifers under the bus over the last year or so. But things like that, I mean, I would rather deal with that than literally living in a socialist country. I live in a socialist state. I don't want to live in a socialist country. So, go vote. Go vote.
Go vote.
And if you are not already subscribed to Integrated with Angela Erickson, please head on over to my channel. If you're on Nick's channel, maybe subscribe, give this video a like. If you're watching on either of our channels, or maybe hop from one channel to the other and like it on both of our channels, that would be awesome. And for those of you who are maybe more familiar with my channel, head on over to Nicholas Cavazos' channel, The Traditional Thomist. He has some great intellectual content over there, where you can really do a deep dive on Thomism with Nicholas. Do you have anything coming up on your channel?
Yeah, so we have, starting in September, we're going to be starting some courses finally. I've had this project literally in mind for years now, but it's just taken a long time to make. But we have basically, the best way to summarize it is a pre-Vatican II seminary course over all of the major tracts that a priest would have received. Lay people, of course, can benefit from it, but that also these tracts are still taught in traditional seminary state. For you, Angela, you'll really like this. All these courses are free, by the way. But you'll really like this first one because the first course is over ascetical and mystical theology, how to be a saint. There's literally textbooks out there of the church that says, this is how to be a saint. Here are the steps. It's not
I
like
love
you
how
have this,
pragmatic it is. Yes, I
yeah, it's
love
not
the
like
church.
I have to have this lightning bolt experience and then all of my faculties are healed and now I just live perfectly. No, it's they give you the answer. They're like, all right, so step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4. Maybe it takes you a while because you actually have to do it, but here are the steps in order to achieve it. That's going to be our first course. We're basically going to go from that course into 3 major courses over Thomistic philosophy, scholastic philosophy. Some of it relates to what we're talking about here because things like logic, we have to start talking about logic again. We have to start talking about like ontology and metaphysics again. I mean, the fact that we're even asking in society, like, what is a woman, tells me that we have really bad philosophy and really bad biology that's trying to be peddled. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about also in the things like ethics, some political stuff, which will be good. After that, we'll get into a full-on 8 courses over dogmatic theology at Father Tancredy's book. Yeah, that's the text we'll be using, The Spiritual Life by Father Tancredy. We'll go over 8 courses over dogmatic theology, fundamental and dogmatic theology, and then finally another 3 courses over moral theology. Again, all of these works being used by I'd like to have Dr. Meinert on. He's just super busy. That's just the main issue. He's just a super busy man. But he's a good friend of mine. But yeah, we're going to have all those courses coming up, as well as some more personal stuff going forward. You guys will see me talk about politics a lot going forward into this election, as well as just in general, because as you guys know, if you watched my last video, my last rant that surprisingly got 10,000 views, I was surprised. Thank you for everyone who subbed and was agreeing with me. Catholic YouTube drama is stupid. It's stupid. It's fake.
I've been saying this for a really long time. I don't get 10,000 views.
I think because I was just ranting I was just like full on rant mode. It was, but it's like, yeah, I literally had a person yesterday ask me after mass. They were like, is there a temptation to go down this kind of rabbit hole of becoming, like a self-exalting influencer? And I was like, 1,000% that exists. And 1,000% it's evil and it happens to people. And that's what my last video was ranting about. It's one thing to do a reaction to something in a charitable academic way where you're like, okay, this is where I disagree with him on this point. I do agree with them on this, and something like that. That's fine. And you invite them on your show, dialogue. That's all cool, right? It's cool if you want to talk about church politics in a good measured manner, I think. But it's one thing when you want to make your entire career about how can I tear down other individuals, even if you don't say that, but other individuals for views. And it's not genuine criticism like we're doing tonight, where we're saying, look, this lady literally is saying that illegal immigration is not a crime. It's things like, yeah, I disagree with him on this fine point of ecclesiology, and he's literally a heretic. And I'm like, bro, chill out. You need to calm down. But people do that for money. So it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, it's a huge problem. Yep. Well, thanks for doing this stream tonight. I would say I have all this stuff coming up. I don't know if I do. I'm like, when it works right now. This is just my life as a mom. And that I always say, I will not live my life by an algorithm. So if you want to follow somebody who isn't, for me, actually, I think Catholic content creators have to be really diligent about not constantly being online, like chronically online. Yes. We have to set a good example, and we can't entice people to constantly be on their computers. And so that's one reason I'm not somebody that lives my life by an algorithm, but I also don't want people to feel like, oh, I've got to be on today because Angela's posting something again. Like, I want you to go touch grass. I want you to be with people you love. I want you to be in community. Virtual community is awesome, but God, my whole show is about being integrated. He made us with a body and a soul, and there's something really important about being physically around people that you love. that's what we're made for. Our nervous system is designed to be around people that we love. You don't get that effect online. And that's why it's so easy to dehumanize people online and go after them for money. Which happens way too often. So that just drives disconnect, and I don't want to do that. I want people to live lives to the full and to be saints. I want you all to be saints. So anyway, if that sounds appealing to you, feel free to come over to my channel. I post every once in a while right now while I'm getting ready to have another baby, and I homeschool, and my husband works a lot during the summer, but I'm thinking this winter I'll be able to pick things up a little bit when he's not working so much. It's just how this is what it's like. This is life in the summer for us. So anyway, big thanks to everybody who came on to join us tonight. We really appreciate you. And let us know what you think in the comments about this video. Was there anything that you found interesting, that you learned, or I don't know, just tell us what you think. And we will see you maybe another time. Maybe we'll have to do this again.
Yeah. Take care, y'all.
Take care.